Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io,
And this is Jack from Emails That Sell.
episode 13.
How to Reach Your Prospects Inbox, Part 2. So the average office worker gets 121 emails a day. And according to Return Path, 21% of those emails go directly to spam. So today we're going to look at how you can make sure your emails actually make it to the inbox and exactly what you need to do in order to give yourself the best chances of delivering your emails. Now, the short answer here is don't look like a spammer, and we'll get to that during the rest of the cast. But a quick story on why we want to dive into the content side of sending cold email to improve deliverability has to do with a sequence that I sent out last week that had deliverability issues. And it turned out there was 2 keywords in my first cold email message that sent the message straight to spam. And just by changing those keywords, I was able to fix my deliverability issues. Now, we'll get into what those 2 keywords were and everything else you need to worry about in the rest of the cast. But for now, Jeremy, can you kick things off by telling us, the first thing we should pay attention to when we're writing our email from a deliverability standpoint?
Yes, so I think most of the time, what you need to pay attention to is the formatting. What I mean by that is the font you're using, the text size, bold, italic, all those sort of things, and try to make it simple. Ideally, you should write an email as if you're writing it to a friend, and not try to make a beautiful email that you're going to send to thousands of people.
So if I make sure that I'm not using fancy HTML on my emails, and I'm not overusing bold or italic, is there anything else I need to be mindful of when it comes to formatting in order to get the best deliverability possible?
Yes, you have a few other things like don't use all caps. Spam filter will think you're a spammer if you do that. In fact, all that spam filter is doing is figuring out where I should classify your email. Is that like spam? Should I go to an inbox? And if you're using HTML and playing with fonts and stuff like that, then chances are that you'll end up in a promotional tab. Historically speaking, the spam filter were done to prevent spammers to go through, and the spammer were trying to go through. So they tried a lot of different things. One of the other things they were trying is to use, for example, Unicodes. So some characters in Chinese or Japanese look like some Roman letters. So they use those in order to fool the spam filter. So spam filter became very suspicious whenever they see Unicode. And that's why you should also avoid emojis because they're mostly Unicode. So don't vary Unicode and a normal text, basically.
What about using images in my emails?
Yeah, images is an interesting one because they're usually a trade-off. You could do... Actually, last week I received an email from a cold email from someone selling T-shirts, and there was like a big image in the middle, and that was the founder with having a T-shirt with my logo on it, and I thought that was like a pretty nice thing. So it's a trade-off when you actually get a better reply rate by just adding image, but most of the time that's not true, and adding an image will hurt your deliverability quite drastically because, again, the spammer, historically speaking, were using images to just write text because it's much harder for the spam filter to parse an image to figure out what text you could potentially have. And therefore, spam filter introduced this sort of like ratio between image and text. If you have images, you should have also a lot of text that goes with it.
So I've heard you mention before that open tracking is simply a image that is embedded in your email. Does that same rules apply to open tracking then?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's so important that if you can do that, Because remember, you're optimizing for reply rate and deliverability, not for tracking your open rate. But it's still an important metric. So how do you actually resolve that? So one of the things you can do is simply turn off the open tracking on the first reply, and then leave it for on the first touch email, but then leave it for all your follow-up emails. So that if someone reply on the first email, then that's fine, you get your reply. But if someone doesn't reply on the first email, you can still track the reply rate so that you know if there is a problem with your deliverability or not.
Now, if I want to set up a sequence of cold emails that use a lot of links, I can imagine that including links to pieces of content that could be very interesting conversation starters might help my reply rate. But what does that do for deliverability?
Links usually play a major role in terms of deliverability. Ideally, you aim for 0 links. And the reason for that is very simple. Spammers do want you to go somewhere else. The email is just a way for them to go somewhere else. So they will send you links. They will tell you, go there, go to buymydrugs.com, whatever. And spam filters are very worried about that. So they actually look if you have emails and if you have links, and the more links you have, the more chances that you're going to end up into the spam folder.
So it doesn't matter where that link is pointing to, or are all links equally bad?
That's a good question. The links address can actually go into spam lists. So that's why, for example, you wouldn't want to use a URL shortener like something like bit.ly, for example. Those ones are already in spam lists. And if you use them on cold prospect, your chances of inboxing is extremely low. And the other interesting thing is if you actually point to your own domain and you're sending too many emails, chances are that your domain will also end up into a spam list. So you want to be careful. And as a default rule, just send no emails, no links per email, basically.
So anyone who's listening who has been using links in their emails but wants to improve the deliverability, one thing you might want to test out is putting together an email sequence that just asks the recipient if they'd like you to send that over. And that way you can get a conversation started and share the link. So it's kind of a double win there.
Another point I want to make with links is that you have to be careful if you're using cold email software to not write the actual URL of the link, because otherwise the cold email software will redirect you to their own website to count the number of clicks that happened. But spam filter sees that as a phishing attack. It's a bit like you receive an email that says, hey, click on paypal.com, and that paypal.com is actually sending you to, stealmycreditcards.com kind of thing.
Okay, so in plain English, what you'd recommend is do not write out http://www.mydomain.com and instead just link to a particular word, like go here, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% do that. Yeah. Or don't put it as a clickable link. That works too. Like just write it, and then Gmail and other email clients are clever enough to just transform that as a click.
Okay, got it. Now, what about unsubscribe links?
Yeah, the sad thing here is it also counts as a link. And because spam filter have no idea what it really is, it could be mentioned like an unsubscribe link, but in fact sending you to a spam website.
Okay, so if spam filters can't recognize that I'm sending an unsubscribe link, what's the advice here for all of us who want to respect the CAN-SPAM Act, but not hurt our deliverability by adding links?
The CAN-SPAM Act doesn't actually ask you to put a link to unsubscribe. They ask you to provide a way to unsubscribe to your prospect. So what you can do is just write some text and say at the end, it's like, hey, I understand that, I may be contacting someone that is not interested in what I have to offer, kind of thing. Just reply not interested or unsubscribe, and I'll take you off my list. That's as simple as that. The other thing you can do is you can also add the unsubscribe in the header of the email. So it's a little bit technical, and some tool provide that. Mine does. And what it will do is, from a client standpoint, the client or the email client, will show you an unsubscribe link that you can click on, but it wouldn't count as a link.
So I have one more question about links here, and that's about links in a signature. So I've received a few cold emails that have actually a really nicely designed signature with a headshot, a few links to their LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube page, a company page. It looks great, but now that we've spoken a lot about links and what that does to deliverability, is this the same story here?
Unfortunately, yes. You're adding image, so you're going to have like image to text ratio playing a role, and then you're adding multiple links. So I would say, keep it simple. Just use plain text and see what it gets. In the end, your goal is to not only get deliverability but also replies. So if you really think that having a nicely designed signature is getting you more replies, then by all means go for it. But I will definitely A/B test that with different variations.
So I want to get into some of the keywords that I started off the podcast on, and those were the keywords that landed me in a spam folder. So just for anyone listening, the email that was written was not salesy. It's going to be hard to believe because the two words that got flagged sound pretty darn salesy. They were discount and promotion. But again, just take my word for it that it was worded in a way that it wasn't asking for a sale. So, Jeremy, I swapped out those two words and my deliverability issues were magically solved. So I want to know now, is there a list out there that I can take a look at to make sure I'm not adding in any more, say, spam keywords in the future?
Yeah, historically speaking, you were right. There were a list of words, but it's a cat and mouse game. So if the spammer knows a list of words, then obviously they won't use them, and they will succeed. So what happened is that list of words been replaced by algorithmic stuff. So it could be that the words you used appeared in a lot of past email that's been flagged as spam. And I think that's more or less how it's happening. You could use existing old list, but at the end of the day, there is no such things anymore, unfortunately.
Okay, so it sounds like the takeaway here is if you've gone through every deliverability point that we mentioned in this cast and the previous cast on the technical side of deliverability, then maybe take a final look at your keywords if you're still having issues, because the issue could be there and maybe a variation could solve that problem then, right?
Yeah, totally correct.
All right, so let's dive into length, because we've gone back and forth about the image and text ratio. What's the final word on how long your email should be if you want the best deliverability possible?
Yeah, so from a deliverability standpoint, obviously you want your email to be long. And we know that because if you send a first touch email and you don't get a reply, you may actually end up into the spam folder, and you send a follow-up that includes the first email, meaning your email now becomes larger. Then it suddenly gets delivered, and the prospect comes back and say, "Hey, I didn't hear you. I didn't see your first email, but I've seen this one. The first one landed in my spam folder." And this is why the more text you add, the less chances of a spammer you are, basically.
Okay, so this is interesting because we had a podcast earlier that talked about to increase your reply rate, you'd want to send a short email. There is a phenomenon going on where you'd want to, it's like reciprocate what the other person has given you. So if you receive a long email, there's sort of a human need to reply with a long message as well. So I guess there's a sweet spot here. Longer emails get delivered, but shorter gets replies. So we're looking for that sweet spot, which probably is a good segue to talk about variations here. Now, we'd probably want to test a few different emails, but what role do variations play with making sure we inbox properly?
Yeah, I love talking about variations, because most of the time when you talk about variations, which is basically A/B testing, most people think like, oh, it's for testing stuff. And in fact, not only. If you actually have a lot of variations, then your chances of inboxing are way greater. And the reason for that is, as you're sending a lot of emails, if they all look similar, except maybe the name of the prospect or the name of the company, then spam filter will say, hey, a few people flag that as spam, so that must be spam. But as you add more variations, then the spam filter will say, well, that's not exactly the same email. That's actually pretty different because, you may have multiple variations for the first touch, multiple variations for the second touch. Let's say you got 3 and 3, then it's already like 9 different emails that you can send. So a spam filter just think like it's different emails, and therefore they can't necessarily know for sure that this email's been, is a spam email. So that works better.
Yeah. So, all right, it's a good idea to include, you said, up to 3 variations per touch. I want to know how different each variation needs to be. And if you think I should include, let's say, personalization for an intro or a PS for each different lead.
So I would say the more different, the better. And this works great for 2 reasons. The first one is, as I just mentioned, the spam filter will just think like it's really different emails. So that will work great. And the second thing is A/B testing in general, when you're trying to improve, optimize your reply rate, works great when you're actually doing like very different variations, like you're trying a different approach, you're trying something completely new, rather than sort of like fine-tuning on 1 word or 2. Most of the time people just do that, they change, or even the subject line they change, but they got like 4% reply rate. That's not what's going to bring you to 20. That's not what's going to bring you to 30. So you really need to be bold and really change your approach, try something really drastically different, and see. And that way you get a much better chance and faster way of going to that 20% reply rate. And then after that, then you can do fine tuning. That's for sure.
Okay, so it's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone there. You're inboxing more and hopefully bumping up your reply rate. All right, well, it sounds like we've gone through deliverability in depth here. Jeremy, great cast.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. That was awesome.